So now that we've built out our HTML structure, we're ready to implement some styling. And styling is really where all the magic happens. So with just the plain HTML, the web page really doesn't look like much. It just looks like a regular text document. There's no layout, and it certainly doesn't look like what our design is. But we can see that we actually do have the main contents in the container areas that we can actually start shifting around and moving them around using CSS in order to present it to the user more in line with what our original design was. So the way that we're going to be doing this website is because we're going to be looking at it from a mobile first perspective. And the idea here is that we want to start with a media query, and what media queries do is they allow you to present your website on different breaking points and present it in different fashions. And when we're designing from a mobile first perspective, so that would be going to just adjust this to be a mobile first, so we're going to design it as what it's going to look like from maybe an iPhone, or maybe a slightly bigger screen there. So we're going to take a look at our website, and this is what it's going to look like on the iPhone. So when we're thinking mobile first is we're going to set these breakpoints. So whenever the website gets a little bit bigger, so maybe we just set it responsive so we can dynamically adjust the size. So we want it to present different. We want to present differently depending on what size of screen the user is coming in on. So we can also adjust it back and forth. And these different adjustment points, these are the actual breakpoints that we need to look at when we're resizing our website and realigning some of the elements in our website to be presented differently on different screens. So the idea is that on a small screen, we want to take up that full available width of that column. And on a larger screen, we actually want these to stack as two separate columns. So let's take care of that within our styling. And we've already linked to style.css. So now I can open up style.css and I can begin working with that. So first of all, we created an ID primary, we create a second one secondary. So we are able to easily identify these containers and access and apply some CSS to them. So we've got primary, and then over here I'm going to apply this to secondary. And let's set some default widths. So what I want to do is I want to build from a small size, and once the sizes actually get bigger, this is when I want my media screen to update and change and apply different styling. So basically what this is saying is that if we've got a minimum width of 480, so 480 would probably be the smallest that we'd work with for mobile, and at this breaking point, so if it's larger than 480 or if it's larger than our smallest screen, then I want this CSS to get applied to the rest of the page. So we're going to build out our default CSS over here, and then within the media query, this is where we're going to take care of those customizations for the different sizes. And because we're starting with a mobile first perspective, is that we're going to start building out and setting our styling what it looks like when it breaks past 480. And this is different than with media queries. You've got the option to do min width and max width, and the difference here is that when we hit the max width, then we get something applied, and the min width takes it from the other side where the min width has to be 480. So let's take a look at this, and maybe I'm going to apply a background color at first so that we can actually see some really nice changes. And I'm probably going to have to remove these because this is going to really make our website kind of look pretty bad with these colors, but this is just to illustrate the breaking points. So maybe I could do this red so it really stands out when it breaks. So let's refresh this, and we see that with the min width, whenever our web page is greater than the 480, then we get that styling applying. And I'm just going to quickly flip it over for max width so that you can get a better sense of what it's going to look like from the other side. So what do you think is going to happen here with the max width? When I refresh it, we see that our styling is gone, but when we shrink it down, this is when our styling comes back. So that's the real difference between min width and max width. It depends on the perspective and how you're building. And because in this case, I want to start out by applying all of this styling to the smallest size and have the breakpoints on the larger size, I'm going to start with min width. And it does take some getting used to work with the different min widths and max widths. You can also do an in-between here where you've got a min and a max, and you can do various combinations. So it can really get fairly complex as well if the need is there. So let's set some basic widths. So when it's smaller than 480, we just want to take the full 100%, and 100% is the default on the div, so we don't have to worry about that. But we do have to worry about it when it shifts, when the size is actually larger than 480. So this is where and why we need to add in those widths. So let's take up 60% of the width. And when you're designing responsively, you do need to always consider that it usually is better to work with without actual fixed sizes, so with these fluid sizes where you're using percentages, just because of the fact that it gives you the more flexibility in presenting that content. So I'm going to actually set this to 35 because we are going to have a little bit of spacing in between there. So we don't want to take up that full available spacing. So I'm going to set it to 60 and 35, and I'm going to keep the colors for now until we add in some content, and then we really apply that more of a look and feel of what we want, because this is just going to help us illustrate where this breakpoint is, and we're going to see the shifting of the widths. So one other thing that I do need to include, and because this is going to be a 2-column website, so let's take a look at this, and I'm going to actually make it bigger because we're not able to see anything. So we see that right now we've got the 60%, we've got the 35%, but they're not actually aligning. And this is where another important piece of property that we need to add in using CSS, and these are floats. Floats allow us to specify where that particular container is going to sit. And with a 2-column, it's really easy and straightforward. So we've got the primary is floating to the left, and remember back at our diagram here that the primary, or it should actually be slightly bigger, and we want to make this one slightly smaller because it's not going to have as much content. So we have this one over on the left hand side, this one on the right hand side. So if primary is floating left, where do you think secondary is going to float? And if you said right, you are correct. So let's take a look at this and see what it looks like. So see, now we're forcing the content to align properly. And there's one thing that's popped up here, that we see that our footer is actually being displayed between our content here. And that's because the way that content is handled, that it automatically tries to align itself in the available space. And especially if you're pushing it to the left and to the right, then it's going to say, oh, well, there's a little bit of space available here. Let me move myself in there because that seems to be available. And so this is where we need to do a clear on the footer or on the float lefts and rights. And sometimes this is one of those things that people get caught up with, where they float it left, float it right, but they forget to add in the clear. And the clear is essential part of structuring the web page, because you don't want that. So I haven't actually identified, I'm just going to use the footer element, but if you reuse footer within your code, then just be careful that you're able to identify it properly. So I could probably just do ID footer instead as well. So we do need to clear these floats in order to present our content properly. So let's give this one a background color as well, so we can actually see where the containers are. And this is actually useful when you're building out websites, that you're able to color and see where the actual contents are sitting and where your boundaries of the container are, especially if you're not using any kind of placeholders, because this then it's really hard to figure out where your boundaries are and so on. So you could even, sometimes you'll find people add in like a border or something like that. So maybe I can add that in solid black, so that you can really see where your content is falling. So I'm going to add in a bunch of borders, and we're actually going to remove these borders. So let's refresh that, and we can see where our content is sitting. And actually I have a better idea with the border, so maybe I can add in using a class. So I'm just going to create one, border 1, and I'm going to add this in as a class, because this is actually going to make it easier for us to remove out these borders later on. So here I'm going to apply a class. And I'm going to apply a class to each one of these sections as well, so that we do have that border that we can see. And also I'm going to apply one to this nav, I'm going to apply one to here and to there, and just quickly taking a look, and I think I've got them all. So let's refresh this and see what it looks like. So we can see that the way our website is structured and laid out, we're getting that kind of similar structure to here, and it's actually starting to look and present itself more in line with our design. So in the next lesson, we're going to continue to work on this and really build out the way that we want our website to look. We're going to add in some padding to structure this text a little bit better, and a few other things that we're going to add in to make it look more presentable. And of course, we're going to style this navigation menu so it's not an unordered list anymore. It actually presents itself to the user as a navigation menu. So all of this and more is coming up.